we have to let everybody in the industry know who he really is, so he never works in this industry again.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've got Pam Almand and John Pruden with me today, and we are going to be talking about cancel culture coming to audiobooks. Now, I don't necessarily want to get people in trouble or out companies or whatever, but there is important information that I think a lot of people don't know. That is going on in the publishing world, and this hopefully will give at least a little bit of a glimpse and a personal face to those that are being affected by cancel culture in audiobooks. And so, Pam, I'll start with you, and then John, if you could just introduce yourselves a little bit, narration backgrounds, let us know how long you've been narrating, and genres that you typically narrate.
Great. I'm Pam Almand. My company is called The Captain's Voice, and I've been doing voiceover work for about 15 years, I guess, and I've been doing audiobooks for 7 or 8, and I narrate just about any genre except erotica, just my personal preference. But I have been doing a lot of work for Regnery Press for a lot of the conservative publishing houses, and I enjoy doing that. I do set a little bit of limit. Anything that's really completely antithetical to my views, I am at the point, blessedly, that I can turn them down.
Great. How about you, John?
I am John Pruden. I did my first audiobook in, I think it was 2008, as a lark. I thought, I can do this. And it took me a month to do my first book, and the author was very patient and liked it a lot, and shifted all my voiceover work to just audiobooks. I've done over 280 audiobooks, won an Audio Award for what I typically do best, which is nonfiction. And I have a military background. I flew Black Hawks in the Army. So I have a military background, and aviation background is my degree from Ohio State. And so I knew a lot about military acronyms, and I became a go-to guy for a lot of other audiobook narrators. And it's being a gun guy. I was like, I didn't want anybody to know I was a gun guy, because I'm also a firearms instructor. And that got out, and one of the publishers was like, you know about guns? We have books about guns. And I was like, duh, why didn't I think of that? So I started getting more gun books, more conservative books, got a bunch of Christian books, and then the walls came tumbling down, and we'll get into that, I guess.
Great. So just a little bit of a tie-in, John. You probably don't know this. Pam did not fly Blackhawks, but she did fly 747s in her previous life.
We met at APAC a number of years ago. We were trying to remember when.
Right. Yeah,
and, you mentioned that to me.
That's
awesome.
The name of the company. It has nothing to do with narration, but it's memorable. The female pilot versus my name, which everybody forgets.
Yeah, the captain's voice. It's great marketing, which I thought from the very first time that we met. So I want to get into some of the experiences that each of us has had. And I think I'm going to keep going the same direction here. So Pam, why don't you tell us a little bit about what started it? I know the book. I'm pretty sure I know the book that started this journey for you, as far as getting some, let's say, negative feedback.
Negative feedback. That's a
then
very kind way of putting it.
I'll say it that way. You can put more, flesh that out a bit more.
Well, I had the first book that I did in that venue was a book called Grace Canceled, And it's by the first woman head of the NRA, and Dana Lesh. And I got some negative feedback on it, but not really nasty stuff. More just disagreeing with the premise of the book. The next one that I did that got very serious feedback was called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier. And the feedback that I got personal messages from people who remained anonymous, but who said, how could you have narrated such a horrible, horrible book? And I think the people who gave the negative feedback had probably not read the book, because the author was not anti-trans. The whole premise of the book was just anti-trans for preteens, and seeing the trend of groups of preteen girls, cliques of preteen girls, thinking it was very cool to change genders and doing irreversible damage to their bodies with the consent of schools, but many times without the consent of their parents. And these are preteen girls. She came up with a bunch of statistics and all that just staggered me, to be honest. It's something that everyone should read. And in the reviews of the book on Audible, some comments were from trans people who said, this book needs to be written because this is what happens. This is, kids that age are not mature enough to make decisions like that by themselves, and their parents, at the very least, need to be aware of what's happening. Mm-hmm. So, but, even despite that, despite the idea that I agreed with the author's premise, I narrated the book. I read the words. I was paid to do so. And yet the personal attacks just boggled my mind. It really hurt, to be honest.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a tie-in with ours, so I'll go ahead and jump in next. And John, I think you might have the best examples. But what happened with us? We have Black Hills Audiobooks as well. I say we, it's my wife and I that run these three tiny little audiobook publishing companies. So Black Hills Audiobooks is kind of anything that's not overtly Christian, I funnel through Black Hills. And one of the books that I heard about years ago was When Harry Became Sally by Ryan T. Anderson. And I heard about the book. I thought, this is going to be an important thing. So I want to be a part of this. And so we pursued it, and were eventually able to publish the audiobook. And I had maybe one or two people mention something the first APAC after that came out, which I was kind of like, this is not going to go over well in the industry. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But then 2 years ago, last month, Amazon censored the book. They completely removed it from print, ebook, Kindle, audio, new, used, everything. Made the entire book disappear from every seller. And it happened to be 2 days before the Equality Act hit the House floor. So it was we believe, a concerted effort to get rid of the most comprehensive and compassionate critique of the trans agenda, right up there with Irreversible Damage, with the book that you did, Pam. And I think I should have checked this out beforehand, but I think they came out very similar timing. When Harry Became Sally was first. Yeah. But the censorship was happening about the same time, and Irreversible Damage was pulled from Target and a number of different platforms as well. So those, I think, were the kind of the two books that really started the censorship.
Cancel culture, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so anyway, about a month later, God said, okay, now build this. And so we have CrossCurrent, which is the platform that we are the reason that we're talking today is because we're looking for wanted people to know about CrossCurrent, which is basically if you think of Audible and Kindle for Christians and conservatives in one instead of different apps. So that's basically what CrossCurrent is. And I think I'll say a little bit more before we switch over to John. So we had when that came out, when that was pulled, obviously it got no press in the regular media. Conservative independent, it started getting a lot of press, but when people found out in the audiobook community, that's when we started hearing about from people and about the stuff that was going on. So one of our favorite narrators called me in tears because of the hate that they were seeing against me personally, against my family, who these are from people that we had employed, that we had given work to, and saying they never wanted to work with us again. We heard about a concerted effort to blacklist any narrators that worked with us and that would support the work that we did, and the type of books that we would do. So there were, so threats against us that we heard about. So started. We didn't have a security system. We didn't have anything in our home here in South Dakota. And actually, before this happened, I felt God saying, "Do these things." I'm like, why? But get a gun. What? Why? Hadn't never had an issue with them, but never had any desire to shoot one or do anything, have one in the home or carry or any of that. But in the months leading up to that, the book being pulled and the kickback that we got from it, that's one of the things that I believe was God preparing us, because and a lot of different things like that. But anyway, so that's a little bit about what's happened with that. Pam, it looked like you were wanting to ask a question there.
No, I'm shaking my head with everything that's happened. There's tolerance seems to only go one direction.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah. All right, so let's move to John. I'd like to hear your story. Thank you for your service, first of all, and appreciate that. And I'm sure you have. It would be fascinating if you wrote a book about your life as a Black Hawk pilot. What you can. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you can't talk about, but anyway, I'll throw it to you, and love to hear your experiences.
Well, thanks for your support. It's not so much stuff I can't talk about; it's stuff that I can't remember anymore. I was on an audiobook panel before APAC a number of years ago, and I was asked to talk about my military background and how I use it to do thorough research in military history and things like that. So I got up and I spoke. And one of the things I talked about was you need to find your niche in audiobooks, and mine turned out to be military and firearms, because I'm also a firearms instructor. I'm one of very few people, so that's my niche. And a lot of people, their mouths hung open, and it seemed to go okay. After the talk, two people came up to me and said, "You're so brave. I could never do that because I would lose, I have to support my family." And I'm a single guy at the time.
I think there are definitely more, but as you said, it's not something that you usually are very forthcoming about, because we all know the preponderance of radicals left, non-conservative leaning in the industry, but and really non-Christian, or maybe I don't know if I should go so far as to say anti-Christian, but I came out, if you will, at speed dating this past December. And because I do feel like everything that I have is given to me by God. And I feel like if I can do things that glorify him, I will. And I just felt compelled at the end of speed dating to say, I'm so grateful to God for giving me this and giving me the skills and giving me the luck in a lot of cases.
Good for you.
And I didn't realize that was such a big deal, but a couple people commented and they said, well, one, Corey Werner, who's, he is a Christian himself too, and he does all kinds of books too, but I've done a lot of work for him. And, they
so Corey
applaud
started Christian Audio, now is One Audiobooks. Yeah.
Mhm.
So my issue came up when I became comfortable with who I was in my own skin within the industry, and everybody knew I was a conservative. I had a drive at the time to go to January 6th. A friend said, "Do you want to go?" And I didn't know why. I said, "Yeah." And we actually drove 28 and a half hours from Colorado straight through to get there, and stayed at a friend of mine's in Arlington, Virginia. And we went to the rally, and it was an amazing, amazing event. And then there was a second event that wasn't planned, or so we thought. And that was what happened when everybody got to the Capitol building. And there were a lot of really, as everybody knows, unusual things that went on. The friend of mine that was with me, two friends actually, one was a newspaper publisher for our local town here in Colorado, and it's a very conservative Christian paper. And then he's the owner and editor. And then the other guy that was with me was a state representative from Colorado. And the newspaper guy said, "Hey, why don't you write an article for the paper?" And I said, "Hey, I'll write one too." So we both wrote articles about what we saw. And my angle was false flag flies over the Capitol. And I wrote it, put it in the paper, didn't hear boo about it, one way or another. And then I put it on Facebook. And I thought, hey, it worked in the newspaper. Why not put it on Facebook too? So I did that. There was one person in my friend group who was in the audiobook industry. And she didn't know she was the only friend from the audiobook industry in my friends list. She went to somebody else. Now she had told me, "Oh, I'm middle of the road. I'm neutral. I stay neutral." She went to someone else. And then that woman blew it up on Facebook. "John Pruden is an insurrectionist and we need to get him out of the industry." And then about 65 people got on this big, long list of, how crazy I am. And, how could I be so wrong? And we knew he was crazy, but we didn't know he was that crazy. And he's got a beautiful, the best one was, he has a beautiful voice, but he has mush for brains. And that was the polite stuff. And some people got pretty, vocal in their input, but that one woman said, "We have to let everybody in the industry know who he really is, so he never works in this industry again." Now, one of the things about the left is how insightful, or not INSIGHT, but INCIT, how insightful they are, is she made that declaration and didn't know that I could read the entire thread, because we weren't friends, but I could see her thread and I read the whole thing. So I chimed in and I said, "Hey, if anybody has any questions about what I saw and why I said what I said, I'll answer them." Two people asked questions. I answered one, and then she blocked me. And so I was like, this is weird. So I got screenshots of everything everybody said. And then she erased that one comment that she wrote. And I thought, well, that's pretty curious. And then all my work dried up. And I lost, over 80% of my income. Publishers who gave me 1 or 2 books a month. I was doing about 25 books a year. just stopped contacting me. I was so busy. I was turning work down. I didn't have to seek out any work at the time. Then all of a sudden, no more offers came in, and it just completely dried up from about, so that was January that happened, obviously. And I think it started in March and then hit hard in April, and it hasn't come back. I think I work for like 2 publishers now. Producers, and I was put into a position of, and there were no threats on in my experience. It was silence. I was canceled, blacklisted, and nobody contacted me. And I couldn't, I was in a position where I couldn't reach out and say, hey, Claton, did you hear I got canceled? And if Claton was like, why, no, I didn't, but you are with me now, so I didn't want to bring attention to it. So I just laid low. And, there were very few people who would hire me, would get hired by someone at one company and do a book or two. And then all of a sudden that company would stop contacting me, like a new person at a company I'd worked for before. And I think what had happened is they would go on Audible and saw John Pruden got a new book and it was produced by this company, and they'd go and contact that company, and they were following my work to keep canceling me, is what it appeared to me. And then things really got weird when and the story just goes off in a lot of different directions. I found out it was God that told me to go to January 6th. God told me to go to the Maricopa County audit, and I saw election fraud firsthand with my own eyes at a professional inspection level of ballots. I touched every single ballot I touched for just 2 days, and that was about 2,200 ballots was fraudulent. Then I got on my buddy's U.S. Senate campaign, and I'll tell you what, I met more cool people, more Christians, and more grassroots conservatives all over the state of Colorado. And I had just moved here, 4 years ago. And everybody kept saying, God's in this, God's in this. We're at war and we're going to win. God's going to win. He knows what's going to happen. And that just grew and grew. And I don't know if you know this or not, Pam, but God talked to me a number of times. I found out one that I know for sure. And I got baptized about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Oh, great.
And
congratulations.
Found a church, found a pastor, and he's a member of the Black Robe Regiment, and great guy, Garrett Grotner, at Fervent Church in Colorado Springs. And so my life has taken a really cool turn towards God. I was a non-practicing Catholic all my life. And now I'm growing this scraggly beard because I play Simon Peter in a religious play at our local, one of our local churches, and met a whole new group of friends in town. So not making money hurts, but I've gone off into a really cool direction, and it's just, I was telling Claton approached me about this interview and said, I'd like to interview you. And I said, yeah, well, there's a lot you don't know about. And it's stuff is happening real frequently with me, and with relation to God. And it's pretty amazing. It's very amazing. I'm really fortunate in some ways. So, one door closed, another door opened in another direction. I just need to figure out how to make money.
God will provide.
I'm counting on it.
Least expected.
Yes. Yeah, we've been speaking of the money, because this is really for investors. Or one of the big reasons that we're doing this is with a Lions Den DFW, which is kind of a Christian Shark Tank. And just wanted to give a full picture for investors that so that they can realize, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. We are solving a lot of these issues, at least in the audiobook and ebook space. And so anyway, but
that's why we need
it's been a very difficult.
like you and CrossCurrent, Black Hills, and Two Words, we have to have that, because otherwise you don't know what's being canceled and censored and
Right.
what's not coming out to the public.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that that we have heard anecdotally, that some books are just not being published, or people are not writing them, or agents are not taking them because if Amazon is not going to carry it like they did with When Harry Became Sally, that's 2/3 to 3/4 of the book market. So 2/3 or 3/4 of their sales are immediately gone before they even write the book or publish it. And so that's something that I'm not sure if we'll be able to work into a full panel interview like this, because anybody that wants to talk about it would be biting the hand that feeds them. And because if we single out Amazon, I've got a lot of anecdotal things, but the publishers, it's a big step for them to say goodbye to 2/3 of their sales in order to be on something like this. And John, you saw, I didn't realize that you just had that one person that was in the audiobook industry, and all it takes is that one person to start complaining to have start the snowball effect. There's a lot that's going on behind the scenes, not just in the audiobook world, but also spiritually. That the root of this is evil. That Satan is not happy that we are speaking truth, and will continue to speak truth. And it'll be interesting to see what God does from here.
At January 6th, my friend and I, we had a long drive home, and we had a lot to talk about. And I said, what are we going to do? We are so far behind. They are so far ahead of us in screwing up this country. We got to get our ducks in a row. And 1 year later, at the 1 year anniversary, it was, oh my God, there is so many organizations and podcasts and forms of media and reaching out and things that are happening in response to that now we're suffering an information overload, just 1 year later. And one of the responses to the woke culture is, hey, we'll have our own Twitter. We'll have our own audiobook publishing company. We'll make our own, Rumble and Parler, and everything just starts lining up. We have all the capabilities in the world to do the exact same thing for us. And then they complain and they say, that's an example of how evil they are. They're pulling together. It's like everything they do wrong, they say that's what they're doing. It's just, the whole Marxist agenda thing is hilarious in its contradictions. But this is a great outgrowth. And I think what you're doing is exactly the kind of thing that needs to be done. And we need to get on this train and get other narrators that are out there that are afraid to be conservative Christian narrators to say, you have a place to come and feel welcome, and be successful and be happy and be secure.
Yeah.
So this is totally the right thing to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think I shared before, it was not my idea. It was nothing that my wife and I thought, oh, we should do this. It was a very compelling God saying, okay, do this. Okay, I don't know how to do that, but you say to do it, so I'll do it. But, huh?
Yeah, it's just like, I told my wife, I was like, oh my God, I got this amazing email today from Claton Butcher, and this is going to happen, and we're, something good's going to come out of this. And Thanks for inviting me and having me. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
My pleasure. I
Always.
appreciate it. One last question. Was it worth it?
For me, totally. Um, you sit there and you go, oh my God, how could things get any worse? And things can always get worse. And people, gnash their teeth at financial problems probably more than anything. And those are probably some of the easiest problems to overcome. You do with less, you find other things, other doors open, and God just came into my life. I'm 62 years old, and all of a sudden it's like this whole new direction just happened in my life. I don't know if it's because of this or a cause of this. I don't care. It's awesome, and it's actually turned out. It keeps getting better all the time, and I'm really thankful in many ways.
Me too. It's definitely worth it. You got to follow your heart. Seems trite, but that's the person that you are. That's the soul. And we know that Christianity and God is love for all people. The people that do the viciousness and do the hatred, that's a major problem for them. And you have to feel compassion for them. But what I've done, I've made my choices and I've suffered the consequences, but they are my choices and they're what I feel are right.
Yeah. And for us, it's never a question of will we do what God calls us to do.
Exactly.
It's a question of, okay, how do we do this? And so again, with us, I go back to my Moses moment with Two Words Publishing. God said, start a publishing company. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I'm just an audiobook narrator, and I haven't even worked for a big publisher. How am I supposed to publish books? You say to do it, so I'll do it. But and God said, what's in your hand? Like, nothing. I have $400. That's it. That's not enough for the post-production, the cheapest part of one book. And but I know a few Christian narrators, and I have good credit. And that was and a connection with one of the big Christian publishers in their rights department, and that's what God used to do that. And then Black Hills and Vision after that, and then this. God says, "Okay, build this." Okay.
If
I
you
don't know
build
how
it,
to do it,
come.
but you say to do it, so I'll do it, and we'll just have to trust you for the the vision that you've given to sustain that, but also to make it happen financially, because it's not easy to go up against Amazon when it's me and my wife, basically. So anyway, so I greatly appreciate both of you. John, I'm planning on doing a lot more work together as long as the work comes, as we can get the work for the audio publishing. But then again, the CrossCurrent, so grateful that you are willing to be a part of this today, and being willing to share your stories and what happened to you, and being willing to, who knows what'll happen after this. I pray that it's not more challenges for each of you. But as you mentioned, God has been leading, God will provide, and we are clinging to that for CrossCurrent as well. So thanks again. Greatly appreciate your time. And I think the most exciting news out of this part of the conversation, out of all of this, was John's baptism a few weeks ago. That was awesome. I had to share that email with my wife. You never believe this. This is awesome. So again, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll be talking soon.